Hi, everyone. Welcome back to week 5 of 5990 Corporate Responsibility and Society. Thank you so much for your submissions last week. I hope you found the case enjoyable. Hope you're also enjoying the snowfall out there. I found a little bit of time to get out and actually get some snowboarding in, so been very good for me. This week, I want to continue the dialogue that we had regarding stakeholders. So last week, obviously, we were talking about stakeholders as a concept, and we learned that essentially we can conceptualize the firm as just a series of relationships amongst different groups, whether they be employees, the government, the local community. We could even go very broad and say the nation or even the entire human race. Some people paint a very broad brush when describing stakeholders and say that, the natural environment is a stakeholder because it is both affected by and can affect the firm, right? So with that in mind, I wanted to continue this dialogue and actually talk about how relationships with stakeholders can lead to competitive advantage, okay? Last week, we had an article where we looked at Gap and Gap's engagement plan with their stakeholders, and we saw that by engaging with their stakeholders, Gap was able to recover from a crisis rather quickly, okay, compared to earlier on in their history when they didn't have this engagement plan in place. So there's a reading assigned this week from a book called What Price the Moral High Ground, and it asks the question, can a socially responsible firm be competitive in the marketplace? So this gets all the way back to this original article that we read in week 1. Milton Friedman was talking about CSR or this investment in social causes being a tax on the organization, and this cost is going to lead to them not being competitive. So therefore, it's against the fiduciary duty of the organization. So this week, I want to talk about, can a firm be more competitive if it is socially responsible, if it engages in socially responsible acts, if it invests in charity, if it does all of these good feeling things that we expect them to do? All right, so that'll be the focus this week. So let me start this off. If we're thinking about how our actions as a company can affect our stakeholders, right? Well, if that's the viewpoint that we're taking, then we could consider this what we would call a stakeholder-centric model of corporate social responsibility, okay? So we do something over here, and in fact, I'm going to bring up my highlighter here. Actually, no, we'll do my laser pointer. So we do something over here on the left, we do some sort of activity, and there is going to be an outcome over here on the right, okay? Whatever outcome that might be, all right? So what happens in between with regards to our stakeholders that gets us from point A over here to point D over here? Well, under this stakeholder-centric model of CSR, what it says is that when we do an activity, it creates a change in how our stakeholders perceive us. All right, it's going to alter their perception based upon the benefits that they actually receive from this particular action. So it's a very kind of egotistical, what's in it for me sort of way of looking at of corporate social responsibility. Right? So something happens with them, it alters the relationship that we have with our stakeholders, thus leading to various outcomes. Okay, so the outcomes that we're going to be talking about today are ones that are highlighted in Frank chapter 4 of What Price the Moral High Ground. So Frank makes several assertions regarding stakeholder groups and how being a socially responsible company might actually work out for the better for us. All right, so let's go through these in turn here. So let's start with the stakeholder perceptions. When we do something, okay, when we do something as a corporation, many times our stakeholder groups, our constituents, our employees, our customers are going to ask themselves a certain set of questions. Okay? They're going to come up with a list of attributions that they're going to assign to what we have done. So commonly the questions that they're going to ask are things like, why is this company doing this certain thing? Why are they supporting this cause? Okay, why are they engaged in this particular activity? All right, these kind of fact-finding questions. All right, maybe not explicitly asking them. This might be more of an internal monologue, but there's always a bit of wonder here. Okay, now with this, they can either go with an extrinsic attribution or an intrinsic attribution. So if they feel that this is or if they ascribe to this an extrinsic attribution, they're more likely to say, okay, this company, this particular company, they're only doing it to make a profit. All right, they're doing it to make a buck. They don't really care about the cause. Okay, they're just doing it because it looks good. Okay, now an intrinsic attribution, if your constituents, if your stakeholder groups assign an intrinsic attribution, they are more likely to say, wow, company XYZ genuinely cares about this particular cause, and we like that. All right, now you can probably guess that when people assign an intrinsic attribution to an action or something that your company has done, this genuinely leads to more favorable outcomes. Okay, but does that mean if you are a for-profit company, you will always elicit this extrinsic attribution if you're a for-profit company? Okay. Now, what's funny is the research actually says no. We find that consumers are actually very accepting of the idea that a company needs to make money in order to exist. Okay, a company needs to make a profit, and that's true whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit. You need to make money. You need to be able to pay the bills. So they're very accepting of that, the profit motive. All right, as long as they feel that to a certain degree the company actually cares about the cause. So consumers are very much willing to kind of bridge the gap here. Yes, it's benefiting them, but since they care about the cause so genuinely, that's totally fine. All right, so this is the attributions that they genuinely make here. Okay, other things that they try to perceive. Right? A lot of times a stakeholder group, when a company does something, they're going to ask, does this affect me in some way? Does it benefit me in any way? And this can have a profound impact on how your stakeholders react to what you are doing in the marketplace. All right, there is a study, and it's an old study back in 2008, but it fits this so perfectly that I keep using it even to this day. So this particular this particular paper studied a company that dealt mainly with products related to oral health care. Okay, and this company supported a particular cause. All right, they invested in a program. I think it was involved in. It was targeted towards youth that had maybe poor dental hygiene habits, and it was focused on educating them and then providing them with resources and then other stuff, like free toothpaste and toothbrushes and mouthwash and checkups and stuff like that. So kind of a multi-pronged approach. They're trying to increase oral health amongst children and teens. Okay, so they go out and do this, and then this paper, they survey people about this particular program. Okay, do you think this was good? Do you support this program? Those basic questions. And those that surveyed, we found that they had more favorable perceptions of this particular program, and they're more likely to purchase products linked to this cause if they, like I say here, if they believe that the program was effective at improving their and their child's oral health. So it's a very egocentric. So if it benefited me, then I'm more likely to ascribe a favorable attributions to this particular cause. Okay, so does it benefit me? And then the last one is awareness. So there needs to be some sort of awareness. People need to be aware of what you are doing. It needs to be advertised. You're going to be reading a case study next week regarding New Balance. And this was a huge problem of theirs. They did a lot of really good stuff, or they do a lot of really good stuff, but they don't make the public aware of it. Therefore, it doesn't really have an opportunity to alter the relationship that they have with their stakeholders in a positive way. Okay? Their humility is actually kind of negatively impacting the company. So a little preview of coming attractions there. So with this let's take a look more at this. Does this benefit me? Okay, am I impacted by this? We'll dive a little bit deeper and we'll split it out into a couple of different layers. So when something affects me, it affects me in different ways. Okay? We can say that it has a functional effect on me. So this is your bare bones, what sort of like a tangible effect that I'm receiving from this particular product or service. Okay. A higher order effect is what we call a psychosocial. So this is kind of the emotional, psychological type of things that happen from whatever is occurring. And then finally, of values. So what sort of end state do the psychosocial benefits help me achieve? Now these higher order values, this is kind of like what we would refer to as terminal values, right? Kind of like these ultimate things that we are trying to achieve in our life. So that might be a sense of well-being, or a sense of family, or a life of happiness. Okay, things like that. All right. So what sort of values in state are we trying to hit here? So let's take a look at what this particular oral health campaign. And we'll look at the direct beneficiaries. So these are the children and the people that received the free products, received the training and tips on how to better care for their teeth and their overall oral health. So the functional benefit that they received from this program was healthier teeth. That's the bare bones, ultimate, or basic thing that happened. Well, what happens when we have healthier teeth? Well, we could say that from a psychosocial standpoint, that maybe it gives them a better sense of social acceptance with better oral hygiene or something like that. And then the values in state, maybe, it achieves better self-esteem. So what we're getting at here is that when we do something as a company, when we engage in some sort of CSR campaign, or we invest money into a particular cause, it goes much deeper than, okay, we're just helping people have healthier teeth. All right? This is not, sure, people perceive this, but this is not what gets them out of bed and gets them supporting your company and your cause. All right? It's these higher order values end states that we are trying to hit. All right? So self-esteem, if we're able to improve somebody's self-esteem with our investment, with our social dollars and things like that, that is going to move the marketplace here. All right, so this is where we're trying to get. All right, let's look at another stakeholder group. So this is going to be the indirect beneficiary. So this is not people directly receiving the training and the materials. So this would be like maybe neighbors or other people in the community. So probably not a functional benefit. Okay, you don't get anything out of it. But if you support that company, you support the cause, maybe you donate to their initiative or something like that, maybe your psychosocial benefit is you get this sense of, ooh, I'm supporting a company that's helping others. And ultimately, that is going to contribute to greater well-being for yourself. Okay. Ooh, that tea's hot. All right. For stockholders, we know that a company that invests in social causes tends to actually outperform their rivals in the stock market. Right? So it winds up being, has the potential for a better return on investment. And it's actually a less risky investment, so there's lower risk. So for stockholders, if we engage in a socially responsible activity, it could mean better returns for us. The psychosocial benefit would be financial success, and then ultimately achieving our values in state of this sense of accomplishment. All right, so a lot of different ways that we can look at it here. Now, if we were doing this in class, in person, this is where I would stop, and then I would have you fill out the list here for employees, okay? But it's basically the same from what we've already seen in terms of maybe like indirect beneficiaries. All right, so I'm supporting that my company's helping others. Maybe it gives me a greater sense of well-being, maybe a greater sense of accomplishment, or something like that with financial. I don't know. So it's kind of a mix of the two. So we won't go into the example here. Okay. So these are the returns that we get. This is the mental returns that we get as a stakeholder based upon a company doing something. So then let's take it to the next step. Right? So our model, our stakeholder-centric model, says that when somebody gets something in return from what you're doing, that is going to improve the relationship quality that a customer has or a stakeholder has with your firm. So this is going back to a field or a theory in psychology called social identity theory. All right, under social identity theory, and we tend to gravitate towards groups or people or things that, I shouldn't say benefit us, but like maybe in some ways benefit us or like reinforces our self-concept, helps us to achieve, who we want to be in life and things like that. Social identity theory is very interesting. Taken to its extreme, social identity theory is actually where we get things like, in its extreme form, is where we get things like xenophobia and racism, actually. Okay? This kind of hyper-partisan view of the world. But in a simpler form, we could say, wow, this company and I, maybe we share the same values. Okay, this company and I, we share the same values. That's like me. Okay, it benefits me. So yeah, I'm going to be closer to this company. And right here, I always ask my students, can you actually have a relationship with a company? Do you have a relationship with your company or the places that you shop as a consumer, the places you work? And the answer, of course, is absolutely. Absolutely, you can have a relationship with them. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, right? But obviously, we want to have that quality relationship with our stakeholder groups. Now, at the next step of the model, if we have a quality relationship, we have a good relationship with our stakeholder groups, all right? Which is what Gap was ultimately going for. They were trying to create this really good relationship quality. Then we get these company-directed behaviors. We get these things that our stakeholders do that help us. So in the example last week with Gap, that would be like the NGOs working with them to create a recovery plan and then helping them when a crisis actually occurred. Okay, these behaviors directed towards us that we want. All right. So this is what Frank, chapter 4, is talking about right here. Frank is listing these company-directed behaviors and how they might beneficially impact our organization. All right. So one more time, I'll look at this. So we want to go from here. We do something as a firm. It alters the perception. Okay, consumers and stakeholder groups make judgments about it. It alters the relationship that they have with our firm and ultimately leads to outcomes. And what sort of outcomes are there? Well, there's a lot. Okay, there's a lot that we can look at in terms of being a socially responsible company. Price inelasticity. If you remember that from your old economics courses, okay, a price inelastic good is one that a 1 unit increase in price means there's less than a 1 unit decrease in demand. All that means is that people are more willing to absorb price changes. All right? If your favorite store raises prices on their coffee by $1 and you still shop there, you're probably price inelastic. Okay? If they raise their price by $1 and you go someplace else, you're probably price elastic. All right? Gas prices are famous for this. We're all inelastic in the short term when it comes to gas prices. Okay? Purchase intent. Purchase intent. People are more willing to shop at your firm. Investors are more attracted to your stock. We have reduced employee turnover, or maybe larger applicant pools, right, for our employees when we have a position that we're advertising or something like that. Okay, these are all examples of these company-directed behaviors. But what does the evidence say? Does the evidence support? So, off the cuff, we could say, "Oh yeah, sure." If we're socially responsible, yeah, sure, people might be price inelastic. Okay, but what does the evidence actually say when really the rubber meets the road, right? So I picked out some stuff here. They're a bit older. They're older papers, but they really hit the nail on the head when it came to investigating this topic, so I wanted to include them. Alberger and Freeman, back in 2000, they asked this question: are we more likely to get better applicants or more applicants if we're a socially responsible company? And they did a study where they split out people into 3 job-seeking groups, or 3 job-seeking populations: the high choice, medium choice, and low choice. So low choice, if I remember correctly, were people that were about to graduate from their undergrad and they didn't have a job lined up. Medium choice, they had a undergraduate degree and they had a job. And then high choice were people that had a master's degree or above and then were also gainfully employed. And they showed them a job description, an employment ad, and they essentially just asked them, okay, how likely would you be to apply to that particular position? And they changed it. So some of them were shown a job advertisement, a description of a company, and some were shown the same one about a company, but it included information about their social value creation campaigns, their CSR stuff that they were doing, things that they were doing to be a good corporate citizen. And what we found is that really it was only the high choice people that were more likely to say, yeah, I would apply to the socially responsible corporation than others. All right, so these were affected. Okay. Low choice, the undergrads just coming out of college, they'd go work anywhere. They'd apply anywhere. All right, it didn't matter. All right. So, okay, yeah, there is some evidence to say that, yes, we could get more applicants and better applicant pools for our firm, but maybe only a certain subset of people. Maybe if we're hiring for a very skilled position, that could be the case. Okay. 2009, applicants are more willing to apply after reading a pro-environmental message about the organization. And a lot of it wasn't about the message itself, but it was people perceived that firm to have a higher or better reputation. And that's what was driving this. Okay, so the reputation was linked to their willingness to apply. And actually, personal environmental values didn't actually affect this at all here. So there is some evidence to say that, okay, as far as applicant pools go, sure, we will get more people if we're a better corporate citizen. Other stuff with regards to employees, we find that employee participation in social activities actually led to something that we call the EC identification, so employee company identification, which is just the level that you feel like you identify with the firm. Like I feel that this firm is like me, it shares the same values, that type of stuff. And that EC identification led to increased commitment amongst employees. So kind of cool. Other stuff about organizations, there's a lot of evidence actually out there that procedural justice, so procedural justice is this idea that like things are conducted fairly in an organization. So raises are given fairly, promotions are given fairly, punishments are given fairly. The procedures in our organizations are fair and just. And if that's the case, if there's a greater perception of procedural justice, it actually led to more employee commitment. And the effect was much more pronounced for women, which is interesting. So kind of getting back to the historical this historical idea that women have been discriminated against in the workplace with regards to procedures, promotions, hiring, and salary and stuff like that. So interesting stuff there. Employee ethics. If we are a good corporation, do our employees are they more ethical overall? Well, this gets back to this idea that we have a self-concept, we have this image of ourselves, and it is reinforced, it's altered, it's changed by the firm in which we operate. All right, this is in week 2, this is virtue ethics. All right, virtue ethics talks about the role of the community in terms of shaping and reinforcing the virtues within people. So, and you can ask yourself, or you can see how an organization would impact somebody's behavior or decision making. It gets back to this idea, like, why don't we want our children hanging out with, like, quote unquote, the bad kids? Well, we don't want them to be, we don't want that to rub off on them, right? Right? It's the same idea. So this particular paper looked at 5 different OCBs, organizational citizenship behaviors. So these are behaviors, that's your employees going above and beyond for the firm, beyond what's expected of them. All right, and they looked at altruism, conscientiousness, courtesy, sportsmanship, and civic virtue. That's the 5 little ways that they defined this little construct here of OCB. And they found that overall, if the firm is ethical, that their employees actually exhibited more OCBs. Okay, they were better organizational citizens, which is kind of cool. Discretionary CSR spending, so this is just like donating to charity and stuff, had no effect. And that makes sense. Ethical behavior is stuff that is part of the organization. It's ingrained, it's institutionalized. All right, this is just throwing money at a particular cause. Okay, so yeah, we can see how that would happen. Let's see here. There is some evidence. Arnold and Boxall looked at coffee shops that sold fair trade coffee and found that, people were more likely to be price inelastic. Klein and Dewar found that when stuff hits the fan, people were less likely to attribute blame to them. Sen and Bhattacharya, they found that there was a greater perceived alignment between the consumer and the firm if the firm was a good corporate citizenship, a good corporate citizen. I published a paper back in 2014 where I looked at a coffee shop and a subsequent failure. So we had people go through a coffee shop and there was some sort of failure involved. So like the order took forever and it was wrong when they finally got it and stuff like, stuff that would just make you mad as a normal consumer. All right. And we found that if they were given a pro-environmental message and actually allowed to choose, where 10% of their purchase price would go in terms of a charity, they found that, we found that there was greater alignment between them and the firm with regards to their emotions, their feelings of sameness, which led to more trust with the firm, and they were more willing to forgive this transgression and things like that. So With other firms, so Frank brings up suppliers in Chapter 4, and yeah, there's some evidence to say that if you're a good corporate citizen, there's greater perceived trust between the supplier and the buyer, more commitment to the relationship, better cooperation, that type of stuff. So lower supply chain costs. And there is some evidence to suggest that with regards to the stock market, you're probably going to get more analyst coverage by virtue of your reputation and things like that. So there is some stuff to support that there. Okay. Yeah. So with regards to strategic competitiveness and our stakeholders, if we are a good corporate citizen, we can actually engender a lot of really good positive behaviors from our stakeholders, right? And in a lot of ways, we can actually be more competitive as an organization if we're a good corporate citizen, based upon these channels that we've just analyzed here. Although we do have to, kind of take this with a grain of salt. Because like everything, especially with consumers, all right, it is quality and price, right, are what going to get people in the door for you. All right, a lot of times managers will invest in some sort of community initiative or donation charity, expecting that people are going to flock towards their company and buy their products, and when that doesn't materialize, they get frustrated. Right? Well, what we know is that really most people will say, 90% of people will say, if you ask them, yeah, I would switch brands, I would switch to a new company if they were, associated with a good cause or something like that. People will tell you that if you ask them. But in reality, okay, how many of you still shop at Walmart? How many of you still order products on Amazon? All right. In reality, there's a small subset of people, only about 20%, will actually change their purchasing behaviors because it's associated with a good cause. All right. So quality and price still reigns supreme. Classical economics. But it does have a bit of an effect in terms of influencing the buying patterns of consumers. Now, that is not to say that they will not punish you. They will not punish you. All right? If you screw up and if you do something wrong, people are many, many, many more times likely to call you out on social media, boycott you, all right? Talk trash about you. We call it in research, we call it negative word of mouth, but it's essentially just talking trash about your company to other people, leaving negative reviews, brigading, all that type of stuff. Okay? Many, many, many more times likely to punish these unethical actions. If it gets a lot of media coverage, this is a quote from the study I just wanted to pull out, then it makes me think twice about what I am buying. So, not really likely to reward you, but heck, really, really likely to punish you, right, if you do something bad. Okay, it's again an old study back in 2001, but it really hit the nail on the head. People were 66% more likely to punish a firm in some way for unethical activity. And remember, this is in 2001, before Twitter, Facebook were even a thing. Okay, before we had this massive social media complex where we could share information and disinformation almost immediately. Okay, so interesting things here, interesting things to think about with regards to our firms. Okay, so why don't people actually respond as much as they say to our citizenship initiatives? Okay, well, again, quality, price, all right, it's an economic rationalization. This is the number one reason here, right? If you do something good, right, people are still going to take this into consideration, all right? The top four: price, value, brand image, fashion trends, all right? They make their choices based upon this, okay? Other things that might be a little more murky, right? Institutional dependency. A lot of times people will kind of punt the ball down the road, not take personal responsibility for it. You know, if it's sold, if it's a legal product, then it must be okay. All right. They don't go that extra mile to think, okay, you know, how much greenhouse gas is this particular product contributing to the environment, and things like that. All right. If it's being sold, then it must be okay. And actually, a lot of times they place the responsibility on the government themselves. Right? It's not our responsibility to purchase ethical goods. It's the government's responsibility to ensure that ethical goods are provided. All right. And then this is like the the existential, I'm just going to deal with it from now on type of response here. But it's just how things are. It's the price that we pay for growth. All right. So interesting stuff here. Here, I'm going to link to a video. I'll put that right beneath this lecture. It's something called Meals Per Hour, and this was a campaign that Toyota did back in the day where they had their engineers essentially volunteer for food banks, and they applied their production principles, their production methodology that they use in their manufacturing plants to produce cars, and they gave it to food banks in order to make them more efficient in terms of distributing food. Okay. A really kind of powerful story here, and it emphasizes the impact that something that we do as a company can have on our stakeholders and how that might influence our perception or their perception of our company. All right, so I'll link this below the video here. So take a look at that. It's a 10-minute video, and it's really fascinating. I think you'll like it here. Okay, so in finality here, using a stakeholder theory lens, the stakeholder-centric model of corporate citizenship, positive outcomes of CSR are driven by better stakeholder relationships. When we do good things, hopefully we are creating better relationships with our stakeholders, and ultimately those relationships are manifesting in better things for our company. Benefits to stakeholder groups lead to increased relationship quality or perceived benefits. Now, this doesn't have to be immediate, physical, tangible. It could be something very high order, very values oriented, like supporting this company helps me to realize my value end goal of achieving a better world. All right. And then ultimately, it's the relationship quality here that fosters these positive outcomes. All right. So we will, let's see here. Oh, you know what? We talked about GAP already. So I had an example here from E. coli and spinach. I won't go into it. It's just basically like a rehash of GAP here. So I will leave it here with regards to strategic competitiveness and stakeholders. And yeah, I want to thank you. So in the next module over, in the next page, or a couple pages over, there's going to be a little bit about reporting. So a way of creating visibility with our stakeholders is by actually reporting on our actions through an ESG report or a corporate responsibility report. So I'll post another lecture on that page for that. Anyways, thank you all, and I appreciate you listening to this kind of large rambling lecture here. Thank you so much.